The film commences with a young orphan girl named Heidi, who has spent many years under her aunt's care. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, her aunt can no longer look after her, so Heidi is taken to the mountains to stay with her grandfather, Alpo. The townspeople harbor fear towards him, believing he has committed murder in the past. Heidi disregards these tales and does not even ponder whether Alpo might pose a threat to her. Instead, she directly leads her to his residence. As they ascend the mountain, Heidi feels constrained in her formal dress, prompting her to remove it for comfort, allowing her to relish nature's beauty. Upon their arrival at Alpo's home, he refuses to take Heidi in. Her aunt pretends she will return with Heidi but secretly abandons her there and flees. When Alpo discovers Heidi has been left behind, he attempts to stop her aunt, but she ignores him. In frustration, Alpo decides to leave Heidi by herself and secures the house from within. With no alternative, Heidi finds a spot to sleep in the barn with the goats. The following morning, Alpo offers her goat's milk for breakfast, and later takes her to the priest. The priest assesses Heidi and confirms her good health, advising Alpo of his obligation to care for her. Alpo, however, firmly states he does not wish to keep her. The priest then requests 3 days to find another farmer in town who might need a child helper. Back at home, Alpo permits Heidi inside the house, though the interior is arranged for a solitary occupant. Observing this setup, Heidi discovers a stack of hay, happily turns it into her bed, and begins to make it her home. The next day, she encounters a boy named Peter, who regularly comes to herd Alpo's goats. One day, Alpo decides to let Heidi accompany Peter, providing her with bread and cheese for lunch. Heidi appreciates this opportunity, as it allows her to be outdoors. As she joyfully enjoys the fresh air, Peter discreetly consumes some of her lunch. When Heidi notices this, Peter quickly shifts the blame onto the goats. During their conversation, two goats suddenly start fighting, prompting Peter to use his stick to separate them. This action displeases Heidi, who insists that Peter promised not to strike the goats again. In exchange, she agrees to share half of her lunch with him daily, and Peter requests that Heidi keep the arrangement a secret out of fear of Alpo. Upon her return home, Heidi begins acting oddly towards Alpo, insisting on sleeping in the barn. Alpo realizes she has become aware of the unfounded allegations against him and calmly advises Heidi to trust her own judgment over the opinions of others. Her heart and contemplate if her grandfather could be capable of such an act. Heidi's heart melts, and she places her trust in her grandfather. She dashes to embrace him and then joyfully falls asleep in the attic. The following day, Heidi once more accompanies Peter and the goats. In the meantime, Alpo begins engaging in a craft project. When Heidi comes back home, she is taken aback to find Alpo sitting in another chair at the dining table. Alpo then informs her that she is welcome to stay with him, and hearing this, Heidi, overjoyed, within just a few days, she captures Alpo's affection and forms a close friendship with Peter. Feeling more at ease, she eventually decides to cut her hair short. One day, Peter informs her that he will no longer be able to play with her since he has to begin attending school. Nevertheless, he extends an invitation for Heidi to visit his home anytime and mentions that they can only reunite for play during spring break. Upon hearing this, Heidi, too, yearns to attend school, yet Alpo refrains from sending her. He understands that during winter, Heidi won't be able to make her way to town for school since venturing outside becomes increasingly challenging. With the arrival of winter, her confinement indoors begins to breed boredom and restlessness, prompting Alpo to carve a wooden bird toy to lift her spirits. Though it proves to be of little effectiveness, he constructs a sled that glides effortlessly through the snow, taking her for a ride, which successfully brightens her mood. After the outing, he brings Heidi to Peter's house, allowing her to enjoy her time there. At Peter's home, she meets his mother and grandmother, who are facing significant financial struggles following the death of Peter's father. Despite the difficulties, Peter's mother is diligently striving to provide him with an education. After spending the entire day with them, Heidi returns home, embraces Alpo, and feels grateful for his presence in her life. Time passes, and Heidi continues to thrive with her grandfather, as everything appears idyllic until one day when her aunt unexpectedly shows up. She tells Alpo that she has come to retrieve Heidi, as she has secured a job that would enable her to care for Heidi. However, Alpo is skeptical of her intentions, pretending to feel embarrassed. She feigns departure but cunningly searches for Heidi instead. Deep discovers Heidi playing with Peter and asks her to come along, but Heidi declines. Her aunt informs Heidi that Alpo wants her to leave, and upon hearing her grandfather's name, Heidi trusts her and agrees to depart. When Peter returns with the goats, Alpo quickly grasps what has transpired and rushes to the town in search of her, but by then it is already too late. She takes Heidi to Frankfurt, where they arrive at an opulent mansion. Upon arrival, she introduces Heidi, but the governess is not pleased. She perceives Heidi as uncouth and unkempt. Deep reminds the governess that they specifically requested an orphan girl. Heidi's role is to serve as a companion for the owner's daughter, Clara, who is unable to walk. Heidi enthusiastically pushes Clara's wheelchair but accidentally breaks a vase while trying to protect her. Clara, however, accepts all the blame in front of the governess. Now, if Heidi is to reside with Clara, she has much to learn. Thus, they clean her up and begin instructing her on how to adapt to life within the house. Heidi also begins studying alongside Clara, but the revelation of Heidi's inability to read or write leaves everyone astonished. Heroine quickly feels the urge to eliminate Heidi from the situation, yet she cannot act before Clara's father arrives, so she instructs the professor to include Heidi in the lessons as well. In a matter of days, Heidi grasps the household rules, but she doesn't fully transform. She still sneaks pieces of bread into her pockets whenever she can. Heidi captures Clara's affection, and their bond grows stronger as Clara opens up about her sorrow, sharing how deeply her mother's death affected her to the point of stopping her walks one evening. Heidi requests a servant named Sebastian to open the window for a view of the mountains, but when she peers outside, she is met only with buildings. In response, Sebastian informs her that she needs to ascend to a much higher location to glimpse the mountains. Heidi cunningly deceives everyone and slips out of the house with Clara, who is overjoyed because she has never had the freedom to leave. They make their way to the city tower and Heidi abandons Clara to ascend further in search of the peaks. However, she faces yet another letdown as her view is merely a horizon filled with unending structures. Meanwhile, Clara begins to feel anxious but spots a vendor selling kittens and makes the decision to purchase one. Back at home, a panic ensues as everyone discovers that the girls are missing, prompting a hurried trip to the market in search of them. Sebastian ultimately locates the girls, and Clara hastily conceals the kittens beneath her blanket before their return home. Just as Fine is about to express her anger towards them, she begins to sneeze due to her allergy to cats. At that moment, one of the kittens leaps from Clara's lap, causing Fine to become frightened and seek refuge on a pole. During lunch, Fine demands that Heidi stand facing the wall, warning her that a harsher punishment awaits if it happens again. This leaves Heidi feeling awful, leading her to covertly take all the bread she had saved to leave the house unnoticed. However, Fine catches her and reprimands her for not appreciating the privileged life and home she has. Nevertheless, Heidi is more troubled by Clara's tears following this incident. Clara's condition deteriorates, leaving Heidi overwhelmed with guilt. Once Clara starts to feel slightly better, Heidi visits her room to clarify that her departure was not motivated by Clara's presence. As Clara mends, she resumes her normal study routine. A few days later, Clara's father and grandmother arrive, and Clara is ecstatic to see them, though Fine appears displeased with Clara's joy over a friend. Clara's father feels reassured that his plan was effective, yet Fine attempts to sway his opinion, arguing that Heidi is still unruly and neglecting her studies. In contrast, Clara's grandmother insists on forming her own assessment rather than simply believing others. That evening, she shares a bedtime story with Heidi but intentionally leaves it unfinished to encourage Heidi to explore it independently. Heidi confesses that she lacks interest in learning because Peter informed her that education is futile. In response, the grandmother advises her not to take everything she hears at face value and to think critically. Given Heidi's passion for stories, she resolves to devote herself to learning. The following day, Clara's grandmother tells her father that Heidi is a sweet child, but keeping her within the household contradicts her wishes, suggesting that Heidi should return home. However, he is reluctant to comply since Heidi's presence has greatly bolstered Clara's health. As time goes on, peculiar sounds emerge from the house, and servants frequently discover the main door ajar. Simultaneously, Heidi diligently completes the story and successfully learns to read, proudly reading it aloud to the entire family. Clara's father notices this development, realizing that Heidi is capable of remaining in the household, but Heidi does not seem genuinely happy. After this, Clara's grandmother arrives home that evening, while Clara's father is still present. While engaged in a game of chess with his companion, he overhears peculiar sounds. Clara's father, concerned that an intruder has entered their home, investigates the surroundings. However, the source of the noise is actually Heidi, who is unwittingly sleepwalking. She gets out of her room, unlocks the front door, and gazes up at the night sky, much like she used to when tending to the goats. Afterward, she returns to her room and drifts back to sleep. The physician examines Heidi and discovers she is trembling from the cold. He diagnoses her with homesickness, cautioning that if she isn't returned home soon, her well-being could be at risk. Despite this, Clara's father remains reluctant to send Heidi away. The next morning, he informs Clara about Heidi's situation and insists she needs to go back home. Rather than being understanding, Clara becomes upset and locks herself in her room. Heidi is eager to return home but is concerned for Clara. She attempts to speak with her, but Clara refuses to open the door. Eventually, the time arrives for Heidi to depart. Before leaving, she presents Clara's father with a wooden bird crafted by uncle and assures Clara that she will return for a visit. Clara's father believes the household will now be quiet, but as soon as he turns around, he notices a kitten. The cook scoops it up, decides to keep it, and names it Heidi. Meanwhile, Heidi makes her way back to uncle's town, where she is warmly greeted by everyone. She quickly goes to see uncle. But circumstances have changed now. Uncle is enrolling Heidi in school, and during winter, they relocate to a home in the town. Heidi's new instructor is kind, making the learning journey easier for her. Everything ultimately goes back to the way it was as Heidi finally achieves the life she has always wanted. Even with her happiness in the mountains, Heidi still experiences a yearning for Clara. She writes her letters, and when Clara reads these messages, a wave of sadness washes over her, realizing she never had the opportunity to say farewell to Heidi. Observing her granddaughter's distress, Clara's grandmother decides to take her to visit Heidi's home. When they meet again, the two friends are overjoyed. Clara's grandmother then chooses to let Clara stay with Heidi for several days. Heidi introduces Clara to her mountain way of life, strengthening their connection. However, this incites jealousy in Peter. One day, he forcefully pushes Clara's wheelchair over a cliff. It becomes clear to everyone that Peter needs to be held responsible for Clara's safety. Poe remains close to both children without fail, but then Clara spots a lovely butterfly and, acting on impulse, stands up to chase it. At first, she struggles, but soon she starts to take small steps with Heidi and Peter's support, showing impressive advancement. A few days later, Clara's father and grandmother come to take her home. When they see Clara standing on her own, they are overwhelmed with joy. Before she leaves, Clara promises Heidi that they will meet again. Clara's grandmother gifts Heidi a diary and a pen. In the final scene, we find Heidi happily tending to goats with Peter, just as before, but now amidst her daily routines, she also writes in her diary, realizing a dream. With this touching moment, the film concludes on a heartfelt note. Thank you for watching.